I am super excited. Man, this is the first time that I have facilitated online this year. So I've been waiting on y'all. I have been waiting on y'all. I'm super excited about this particular topic in this particular session. And so um, we're going to just jump right in. We only have now about 57 minutes, and we have quite a bit of ground to cover, but I don't want to rush it. I want you to feel free to use the chat. I can see names, but I'm not going to be able to hear you. I may be able to see you if you turn your camera on, but I can see everybody's name as you all registered for the webinar. So go ahead, drop a good morning in the chat. Let me know how you're feeling. Let me know that you're there. And we're going to go ahead and dig right in. Brianna is in the background. She's going to continue to let people in. We have quite a few people that are on this morning from all over the place, from a lot of different industries. And I am just over the moon excited about that. So we're going to talk about, and the title of this session is Great Expectations. And so we're going to talk about this morning the power and the necessity as leaders to set great expectations. We're going to define what that looks like, but I want to kind of frame something up for you before we go any further. If we only look at leadership through the lens of what we do in our 9 to 5, then we potentially are going to miss the power of everything that we're going to learn. There are so many lessons that we can learn as leaders. There's books, there's webinars, there's classes that you can take. There's even degrees that people can go back to school to get. But if we only take those things and apply them to what we do in our 9 to 5, we're going to miss it. We're going to miss the potential of those things impacting us across the entirety of our life. Why is that? Great question. Because leadership impacts every area of our life. We are leading not only in business, but we are leading in life. If you got yourself here to this webinar this morning, you have already shown some leadership because you got yourself here this morning. If you happen to be a parent and you're raising children, guess what? That's leadership. If you volunteer in your community, guess what? That's leadership. If you volunteer in the place where you may worship in your church, guess what? That's leadership. If you serve on boards, if you serve on councils, if you serve on committees, within the context of your particular workplace, guess what? That's leadership. If you are the person that drives a particular process within the context of your team, guess what? That's leadership. If you're the person that heads up a particular project for your company, for your team, guess what? That's leadership. And leadership, again, it touches every single area of our life. So as we go into this discussion today, I want you to think life and business. What do these concepts, principles, what do these things look like for me? Not in either or, but in both and. Because we are going to use them in both and. Because guess what? Even in life, we have to set expectations and we have to manage them. Because if we don't, then there could be some consequences. I won't give it away. Let me share my screen and let's dig in. Let me share my screen and we are going to dig in. All right, let me pull this one. Let me scroll down. I want to check something. All right, we're on the right one. All right, here we go. We are set. Great expectations. Great expectations. I highly encourage you, take notes. I am going to touch on every slide that is here in this presentation. However, if you have ever attended a class either online or in person with me, I give everybody the same disclaimer. Once I kind of get a feel for the people in the room, I just kind of start flowing. And when I start doing that, you're going to want to take notes. You're going to want to capture some of these things that I say, because if you come back and you ask me at the end, what did I say about this or that? I may or may not remember because it's for the moment. One of the things that I'm always believing for, that every session that I do, that however the content is structured, that the way that it's articulated to the people in the room, that it is meant and tailor-made just for you. And so I believe that that is what we are going to accomplish today. So our mission around expectation is really simple. We're going to learn strategies that are going to help us manage expectations for ourselves. And I'm saying us because I'm included as well. When we think about expectations, again, I want you to think life and business. We're going to use some examples. We're going to share some things. I'm going to ask some questions. And again, I encourage you, let's participate, dig in the chat, throw those ideas out there, because I am not the only one with knowledge. We have some tribal knowledge here with our group, and we want to glean that as well. So how are we managing expectations for ourselves? How are we managing expectations for those we lead? And we're going to talk about two different aspects. And then how are we managing the expectations of our key stakeholders? I'm going to explain what that means, what those key stakeholders are, who they are, and why they are important. So before we go any further, let's light the chat up and let's answer this question. What does managing expectations mean to you? I'm going to give you some definitions. I'm going to give you some things that are going to help frame up the way that I'm going to attack this subject. But I really want to know, and I want to hear some feedback. What does managing expectations mean to you? What exactly does that look like? So let's drop some things in the chat. Let's drop some things in the chat. What does managing expectations mean to you? What does that mean to you? Setting clear
All right, Brian, we have holding self and staff accountable for their job.
Okay.
Managing expectations means setting clear expectations and following up to ensure understanding.
Okay.
Know the person's skill level. Leading by example to set the tone for leading the team.
Okay.
Accountability. A lot of accountability responses. Reframing our current situation.
Okay.
First, you have to voice your expectations, clear communication, knowing the staff, understanding both sides of the individual as well as organizational needs.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Very good. I like it. Thank you.
Reality versus perception, Brian.
Say that again now.
Reality versus perception.
Ooh, I like that. We're going to go there in just a second. Reality versus perception. Absolutely. Managing expectations. So I wanted to start off with that question because I wanted to kind of get a baseline for how everybody sees it. Because I know that when it comes to expectations, the way that I've seen it over the course of my life and career, it has actually changed and evolved over time. At once upon a time, I really didn't put a whole lot of stock into it. I didn't, I was raised in a generation where it was, once it was said, it was understood that you were responsible for it. There wasn't a lot of questions asked. There wasn't a lot of feedback. There wasn't any of those things. And so as a young person, as a young professional, taking my first quote unquote big boy leadership role at 21 years old, and to this day at 51, 30 years later, I still cannot understand what they were thinking when they put me in charge. Because I think about all of the things now at this later stage of my life that I did not know, that nobody shared with me. And one of the things was around how important managing expectations were. I thought that it was, the expectation was set as soon as you said it, and that was it. There had to be no explanation. There had to be no accountability. It was just assumed that this is what it was. And I found out very quickly that it didn't work that way. I also found out it didn't work that way in life. And so when you think about expectations, I want to compare and contrast this against a word that is coming up a lot simply because it's the beginning of the year, and it is the word goals. New year, new me. Everybody sets goals at the beginning of the year. Some people might call them New Year's resolutions. These are all the things that we start out the year, and we do it in business as well. We don't just do it with our personal lives. We do it in business as well. We start off with these aspirational things that are visionary. So these goals are visionary. They become what I like to call the written playlist for the work that the team is going to do, right? Or in our own personal lives, it becomes our written playlist for how we're going to go forward for the year. These are going to be the things that we're going to focus on, that we're going to put time into, that we say that we're going to put energy and effort into. Expectations, however, are the standards, they're the behaviors, they're the structures that guide the execution of vision with fidelity. Let me explain to you what that means. Anything that we do, if we do not wrap it in principle, if we do not wrap it in standards, if we do not wrap it in core behaviors, if we don't wrap it in structure to guide how we go about accomplishing it, then we will not be able to accomplish it in the manner that we see it. Okay? So, in other words, every goal needs to be aligned with expectations of ourselves, expectations for the team, and then expectations around our key stakeholders, if it even has a chance to get off the ground and come to fruition. Setting expectations. That's what we're talking about. And so when we think about expectations, somebody dropped in the chat about expectation versus reality. Many of us can identify with this image. We wake up in the morning, we feel refreshed, or at least we think we do. But the reality is we're more like the one that's got the little bedhead going on. We have a frown on our face. But to ourselves, you know, we're all smiles, but yet we come to our work, we start our day, and we're more like this in reality. We're going to explain why later on. Or maybe you can identify with this one as a leader. As a leader, I was thinking about the movie Finding Nemo and the famous phrase, just keep swimming. Sometimes as leaders, we're told to just keep swimming, right? To just keep pushing forward, to just keep going, to not to stop, not to slow down. We're told, like I was at 21 years old, you got this, we believe in you. And what I thought I looked like was more like the top picture. I thought I had it figured out. I thought I was prepared. I thought I was cutting through some things. I thought I was cutting through water. And then I realized after a short period of time, I looked more like the bottom picture. I was all wide-eyed and I barely had my head above water. I wonder if we have any leaders that are with us today, any of the 84, 85 of us that can identify with barely having your head above water. Or maybe this is you as a leader. Expectation versus reality. The expectation is that we can free climb. We can go to new heights. We can conquer anything. We can take on the world. But in reality, we're just getting started. We're barely off the ground, and we really need to be tethered and grounded, because if we don't, we're going to fall. The idea versus the reality. The idea, and I feel like we need to kind of crack in here a little bit. The idea versus reality. The idea that as a leader, we're going to have all the answers all the time. The reality being, we don't know everything. The reality being, sometimes the answer is, I don't know. As a leader, the idea that we're always going to make the right decision. But the reality is, if you lead long enough, you're going to fumble the ball. If you lead long enough, you're going to get it wrong. I don't mean to discourage you today. I want to encourage you, and I want to stir you up today at the beginning of the year, because I want you to manage your expectations. The idea around leadership that some way, somehow, we are always going to have the right people on the team. And the reality is, if we have any HR people in the group that can back me up, you are going to make a bad hire at some point. You're going to have regrets. You're going to have, the reality is you're going to have times where you're simply tired of making the decisions. That's for another day, though. So the idea, the expectation versus the reality is why we're having this conversation. Because we have to find the balance. Y'all, leadership, in no small part, is about longevity. And longevity only happens if we're following standards, if we are cultivating the proper behaviors that support the vision, the task, the goals, the work of the team. That's how longevity in leadership happens. Longevity in leadership doesn't happen because there's a red pill or a blue pill like the Matrix. Longevity in leadership doesn't happen because one day you magically wake up and you have all the answers. That's not what occurs. The leaders that do it and do it at a high level over the course of time, they have a healthy relationship with setting expectations. So let me pose another question now that we've said all of that. Why is it important for leaders to set expectations? Give me some words that describe why you believe it is important to set expectations as leaders.
Charlotte says accountability. Okay. Melissa, success, clarity role, teamwork, self-reflection, improve outcomes. Team member needs to know the vision and how to get there. Mm-hmm. Guidelines, clarity again, better productivity.
Mm-hmm. I love it. I love it. All correct.
Satisfaction and growth.
Ooh, I like that. I like that. Satisfaction and growth. I like that. That's good. That's good stuff.
Here's another one you may like, Brian. Employees and children will only rise as high as our expectations.
Oh, man, you speaking my language. Who was that?
Joan.
That's Joan. Joan, you speaking my language. I spent a large part of my early years in the workforce working with at-risk youth. And one of the things that I always conveyed to my team was that these young people, these teenagers, will rise to the level of expectations that are set. And so as the adults that are guiding this thing, if we don't set the right expectations in the right way and reinforce them, then we can't expect a certain outcome, right? I love that. So let me share some data with y'all because I found this really interesting. Gallup just released the results of a survey that they did toward the end of 2023. And would y'all be surprised to know that around the subject of employee engagement, in the United States that employees feel more detached from their employers with less clear expectations. So the ones that really feel connected, it's because the expectations are clear. The ones that feel the most disconnected were the ones, the number one thing on their list was the expectations weren't clear. Now, they were followed by things like employee satisfaction with the organization and less connection with the mission and purpose. But I find that very interesting that at the top of the list was less clear expectations. The Harvard Business Review conducted a survey of C-suite executives, so all decision makers, executive decision makers. And what they found blew me away. They found that 70% of them said that the leadership failures that they had experienced, they could attribute them to the lack of clear expectations. To the lack of clear expectations, because they connected to things like performance, decision-making, and adaptability. This is why we're having this conversation about expectation. I love coming and facilitating in the Disruptive Leadership series because I get to talk about things like this. I get to talk about things that are a little bit more uncomfortable. They're a little bit outside of the box because I think we have made leadership in some regards this thing that is really touchy-feely and that there's no accountability and there's no skill involved. But leadership is about relationships and results. And results only come through expectation. That's how you get there. So we need people skills, but it's some hard skills that we have to do. And along with those hard skills, there are hard decisions that we are going to have to make. So here's a word that we need to discuss. This word called disappointment. Again, I want you to think about life and in business, how disappointment is often the fruit of unmanaged, unmet, or unrealistic expectations. All of us have been disappointed at one point in our life or in our career journey. We've been disappointed in the performance of a project. We've been disappointed that we didn't meet some metric or some goal. We've been disappointed in the behavior of a person or a team. We've been disappointed. And leaders, if we're honest, we have to remind ourselves right now at the beginning of the year that we too are human. I know you put on your super person cape. I know you do. And I know you want to fly to the rescue and you want to pull everybody out. I got it. I understand. Been there, done that. But at some point, we are going to have to rumble with this thing called disappointment. Disappointment is a powerful emotion because disappointment can shape future mindsets. Disappointment can shape how we behave going forward. Disappointment can cause us to pause when we should be going forward. Disappointment can cause us to second guess ourselves, but more importantly, disappointment is the fruit. It is the fruit, it is produced because of unmanaged, unmet, or unrealistic expectations. So unmanaged expectation. Let's define these three things really quickly. So unmanaged expectations are those that are not actively either addressed, clarified, and they have no system of accountability. So these expectations are known, but they have not been addressed. We said it and we forgot about it. And then we came back 6 months later. I know nobody on this call has ever done it. We came back 6 months later after we said it and expected some kind of fruit. some kind of result. We expected some productivity or some progress to be made on what we said 6 months ago. But from the day we said it until the day we asked about it, it had not been addressed, not one time. None of us have ever done that, I'm sure. The second thing is, these unmanaged expectations are things that we never go back and clarify. The best example I could come up with is, if we got anybody on the call, maybe y'all can identify with this. If you have teenagers that live in your house and you ask them to go clean the kitchen up, and in your mind, the clean kitchen looks like counters that are wiped off, dishes are washed, floors are swept and mopped, the dishwasher is loaded up, whatever the case might be, the food is put up. But yet you go in the kitchen and the only thing they did was turn the light off. Did we clarify what clean looks like? I love how Brene Brown says it in her book. She says it on her team. She calls it painting done. She said they were having a struggle, and some of the really creatives on her team were struggling with knowing what it was that she wanted. Because it was quite often that she would say, oh, I know nobody on here has ever said this. Just take it and run with it. We've never told anybody that. Just take it and run with it. And then when they run with it, we sit and we say, that's not really what I'm looking for. And it created all this anxiety and frustration, right? And so they came up with this concept of painting done. So at the end of these discussions about some collateral, some creative thing that they were going to build, it was always, okay, Brene, paint done for us. When we're done with this, what does it look like? And it was her opportunity because she's very, very visionary. So listen, if you are very, very visionary as a leader, you need people on your team that are very good at execution. If they are just a bunch of visionary people on the team, you are going to struggle with getting certain results. In contrast, if they're a bunch of people that just execute all the time, you are going to struggle with building relationships. And she said that when she started to clarify, that it changed the game for them. It made her team more confident in taking on these tasks because they didn't have this thing in the back of their mind, just like, are we going to produce this and then she's not going to like it? And then unmanaged expectations have no system of accountability. We have no way, we have not predetermined how to inspect what we expect. Here's something that you need to know about accountability, and I need to tell you this at the first of the year so you don't go through another year thinking accountability is something that it's not. Accountability does not happen after the fact. Accountability is proactive. Here's what I mean. If I have an accountability partner for not eating certain things, but then I go and eat the very thing that I want them to help keep me in check and keep me honest on, and then I tell them after the fact, that's not accountability. I didn't give them a chance to hold me accountable to what I said. All I did was confess what I had already done. There's another word in the context of work for doing that. It's called consequences. And so it is why when you say the word accountability amongst your team, people start to shift in their seat. They start to roll their eyes. They start to kind of check out of the conversation because you literally have said a cuss word in the meeting because they don't understand what accountability really is. Y'all, accountability happens proactively. And so as we set expectations, we have to put around them systems of accountability. Remember, I told you in the beginning, the principles, the standards, the behaviors, those things all become now our system of accountability. We good?
That's a lot. We have some good comments and feedback in the chat, Brian. So
let's go.
Read those out to you. So Christopher says cleaning is a great example because it is subjective. If you don't make your expectations very clear and monitor it. Charlotte says we have the expectation that if they see what we do, they should do it. However, we have to show them what we expect and communicate with them to let them know what meets our expectations and what does not. This last one from Melissa, it can be so challenging to remember that not everyone has the same definitions as you do. There can be no management of expectations without clear communication.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. I knew I liked this group for some reason. I love it. Y'all are right on all points. Y'all are right on all points. Absolutely. And we are going to talk about clear communication in just a second. Hold on. We are going to get there. So let's talk about what these unmet expectations are. This one is pretty straightforward. These are expectations that are known and they simply have not been done. I know none of the leaders on this call have possibly dealt with making a clear expectation. You've done your level best. You've written it. You've made it plain. You reiterated it. You followed up, and it simply did not happen. And the feeling that you're feeling, that frustration is being driven by disappointment. It's being driven by disappointment. It's the feeling behind the feeling. It's disappointment. You did your level best to make it plain, and it simply did not happen. Unmet expectations. And then the last one, unrealistic expectations. Again, I'm going to give this group the benefit of the doubt and say that you've never done this. You've never set expectations that are too high, or even set expectations where the resources necessary to accomplish them are not available. Unrealistic expectations. We probably have done that in our everyday walking around life as well. Unrealistic expectations. So I want to ask a question really quick. What are the potential impacts for leaders who don't manage expectations well? Give me some words around what will happen, what could happen if we as leaders don't pull ourselves together when it comes to managing expectations well.
Frustration, failure, turnover, low performance. The leader will sink in chaos.
I love it. I love it. So I think y'all get the gravity, burnout. I see burnout. Yeah. I think y'all get the gravity of why this is important. But can I give you a few benefits for managing them well? So if you still kind of on the fence on whether or not you really need to dig into this, and if you really need to lean into this in 2024, let me give you a couple of benefits. Number one, it will help you enhance alignment in your team. When you manage teams, especially with a lot of people that do several different things, it is hard for everybody to know who's doing what, why they're doing it, when they're doing it, and so on and so forth. It takes clearly communicated expectations for each role to help you avoid people working in silos. People working in silos is the opposite of being aligned as teams. So that's one benefit. So if you want that, manage expectations. Number two, it will help you minimize conflicts and misunderstandings. I think we can all identify with the fact that if expectations are not set right, there's going to be a disagreement at some point. I'm going to mess with all of the people that have a relationship of some sort, whether it's with a significant other, whether it's with a friend, whether it's with your parents, whether it's with your kids. You have an expectation that this is going to happen and then something else happens. And y'all are, here's what we say, not on the same page. I thought you were picking them up. I thought you were picking them up. That's what it sounds like. And then the last one, builds trust and credibility and credibility. Managing expectation will help you build trust with the people you work. And that is one of the most valuable commodities that you can have as a leader, is to have people that follow you, that trust you. So how do we manage what to expect, first off, of ourselves? How do we do it?
Brian, before we get to that section of managing ourselves, I want to go to a comment that was made.
Okay.
Tony says here, unmet expectations are the worst to deal with. Always get the I don't know responses, even though it's in the training manuals, office manuals, verbal training, and many office talks, etc. So that brings up this question for me, Brian. When you do all of those things and your expectations are still being unmet, what is one thing that you can do to help close the gap between the leader and the employee?
Okay, so let's. I'm so glad that this got brought up, because I knew at some point somebody was going to ask something like this. So what do you do basically when you've done all the stuff? Here we go. Listen, as leaders, sometimes we have to make hard decisions, and we have to evaluate, are these things not being met because there's a competence gap? And is this something that we can train to? If the answer to that question is no, and it is, they've got everything they need, I think they know everything they need to know, they're more than qualified to do it, and it's simply not happening, then this is where accountability has to come in. And they have to be now held accountable with consequence for what it is that they're not doing. And I can't tell you how that looks in your company. I can speak for a time in particular where I had a person that I really, really liked, and I had high hopes for them. And I thought that they would be a really high performer. And after about a year, I realized they were just not a good fit. And the organization and that person, we had to part ways. No hard feelings. But at the end of the day, accountability is what we lean on. The standard is the standard. And so we have to ask ourselves as leaders, where do we go from here? Is it a performance improvement plan? Is that where we go? Is that the meeting point between just completely disconnecting from this person and trying to still continue to motivate them? What is that? And we all have to look at that within the context of our own policies, procedures, and how we go about doing things. That is a realistic scenario that happens a lot. And we have to be honest with ourselves. If they're not performing, there may be some tough decisions that need to be made. I hope that helps. So, to set expectations for ourselves that we can manage, that are met, and that are realistic, here's what I want you to try. A couple of things. Y'all ready? Number one, I want you to watch out how you take care of yourself. Now, when I say take care of yourself, I'm talking about mentally, I'm talking about physically, I'm talking about emotionally, I'm talking about spiritually. I am talking about how you take care of yourself. One of the things as leaders, when we get into leadership roles, we understand very quickly there's a lot of sacrifice that takes place. And sometimes it is sacrifice to our own detriment. And if we don't pause, if we don't hit the reset button, if we don't take care of ourselves, how are we going to be at our best leading the people that are following us? How are we going to do it? In short, I need you to take PTO. I need you to block time off on your calendar to just sit in your office and be. I need you to think about all of the decisions that you have to make. And we love this word, delegate. I'm a great delegator. No, maybe, but you still feel all this weight and stress. Well, maybe you're delegating the task, but you're not delegating the authority to make decisions. So in other words, you're still doing all the thinking for everybody. Take care of yourself. So I need you to watch how you take care of yourself, first and foremost. Number two, I need you to watch how you talk to yourself. Words, y'all, listen, I'm a word guy. Words are like seeds. Words are like seeds. If you plant them, they will produce something. So you have a choice each and every day on how you talk to you. I have a bad habit of saying, okay, now you need to make sure you write this down because you know how your memory is, right? You need to make sure you write this down because you know, and you see what I did? I couldn't just leave it at, make sure you write this down. I had to throw that one little thing, you know what I'm saying? And see, those things begin to take life. I've said it now so long for so many years that my memory sometimes it will just go, right? And I'm like, what in the world? Wait, what was that? What was I thinking? Y'all should see the Notes app in my iPhone. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I know when I get another phone and I transfer all my data to a new phone, to a new device, I know that thing's gonna be downloaded and probably thinking, I know you lying. These notes go all the way back to like 2007. They do, y'all, because I realized part of me taking care of myself and my decision-making well-being, I have to write things down. That was one of my things that I started doing to help take care of myself. But I still sometimes struggle with that self-talk. So we got to watch out for that negative self-talk. The third thing is watch out how you think about your workload. I'm doing another disruptive leadership, I think in the spring, where we're going to talk about capacity. But let me tell y'all something. If you overestimate your capacity, it is a recipe for disaster. Because for whatever reason, we think we can do all the stuff all the time. And that is just simply not true. We think we can accomplish everything. So I need you to watch out how you think about your workload. I need you to become a skillful delegator. But as you're delegating, I need you to delegate strategically. I need you to delegate in a way where you also transfer information, where you also transfer the ability to make certain decisions when it's applicable. That's how you take the load off. Because if you only delegate the task, but you still have to answer all the questions, did you really delegate? You don't have to answer that. I just want you to ponder on that. So how do we manage expectations when it comes to others and what they expect of us? And even our expectations of the people that we lead. Because we need to have expectations of them too. It's not just them having expectations of us, but that's totally fair. I don't want y'all to see expectations as a one-sided deal and think that as leaders, we're the only ones that get to have expectations, because we're not. The people that we lead get to have expectations as well. So how do we do it? Here's what I want you to try. Number one, I want you to communicate up front. We've seen that in the comments a lot today about communication. This one goes without saying. But notice I added the word up front. Not after the fact, not in the middle, not bits and pieces, up front. This takes intentionality. Communicating up front is the starting point to setting clear expectations because it opens the door for people to ask questions. Number two, communicate in detail. Communicate in detail. So let's go back to our example about Brene Brown and painting done. It was just simply that the team was saying, listen, if we would have had all these details up front, we could have very well produced what it is that you really saw in your mind. So let's communicate up front and let's communicate in detail. And then number three, you have to establish a feedback loop. You have to establish a feedback loop. Here's what we typically say our feedback loop is. My door is always, somebody in the chat finish the statement for me. My door is always, right, open. Knowing full well that our door is not always open. Because sometimes we're not even behind our own door. We're off doing other things. We're off at meetings. We're in our own world. We're working on our own work. So how do we establish this feedback loop? I encourage executive coaching clients all the time to block off time for their work. Alicia said only after 11 a.m. to block off time for the work that you have to do. If you have a certain report that's due at the same time every month, block off time on your calendar. I used to, y'all listen, I promise y'all, I used to block off the first 3 hours of my day. The first 3 hours of my day. And it was pretty much set. If the building's not on fire, we didn't fall into a giant sinkhole, or it's not the second coming, y'all leave me alone. Leave me alone. That is the time that I got myself together. I focused. I answered the question. I answered emails. I signed purchase orders. That is when I did all of those things. That was a part of my feedback loop, though. Whether that's email, whether that's in writing, however that comes, you have to give people the opportunity to find you and ask questions and glean from you, because one of the number one things that the younger generation that's in the workforce that they are asking for is they want to be developed. Y'all, as leaders, how do y'all think development happens? It happens through conversation. It happens in environments like this. But those direct line people that you supervise, you got to plant those seeds. You got to pour into them, and that takes time. You got to give the opportunity for feedback. And then lastly, how do we manage the expectations of key stakeholders? Before I get into this, let me back up, because I don't want to glaze over this. So the same way we use this to manage other people's expectations of us, we use these same three things to manage expectations of the team. So you communicate up front with your people. You communicate in detail with your people. You establish a feedback loop with your people. I just want to make sure that I connect the dots so you see how these three things apply to both. They apply to you and them. They apply to you and them. So you want people to communicate up front with you, but you got to create space with that. You want people to communicate in detail, but you have to create space for that. And you want people to give you feedback as a leader on how their work is going, but you have to create space for that. You have to create space for that. All right, now we can go on. I felt that one. I felt like somebody needed to hear that. How to manage the expectations of our key stakeholders. So these are the people that we owe a deliverable to. We owe some work to. That's these folks. So when I say key stakeholders, your work has to go somewhere. If you work in finance, there's a financial report that has to land on somebody's desk. There's a dashboard that has to be created or something like that, right? So these are the key stakeholders that I'm talking about, okay? So what do? Number one, you have to cast vision. You have to establish what reality looks like. And reality might look very different from what they see. But this is where the conversation starts. Casting vision, y'all, is not one-sided. It is not simply you talking. That's not casting vision. Casting vision is talking about current state, but vision is always forward-facing. None of us, whether we wear glasses or contacts, can see behind us. That's not vision. Vision is always forward-facing. And so if we want to manage these expectations from these stakeholders, because I know many of us have said they asking for too much. They're asking for too much. Well, have you cast vision? Have you cast a vision around what's realistic? Have you helped to frame for them what the time frame looks like? A good leadership term is leading up. Number two, you have to give clear and connected metrics. If I told you to walk in place, just simply walk in place, if you walked in place long enough, you probably get tired if you did it long enough. But you want to know what wouldn't happen? You wouldn't go anywhere. You would still be in the same place. So if your goal is to go to the other side of the room, walking in place is not the metric that you need. You can't use that. There are often times where we set goals and we don't have a connected metric. We don't have a clearly defined outcome. What is it that we're shooting for? So we end up producing a lot of stuff that gets us nowhere. If you've ever had that feeling where you've gone through your whole day and you've been busy, but then at the end of the day, you felt like I didn't really accomplish anything, then you know what I'm talking about. So you have to have clear and connected metrics. And then the last thing is you have to show your work. Leaders produce. Dramatic pause. Leaders produce. Somebody type in the chat for me. Leaders produce. Leaders produce. I want you to remember, leaders produce. You produce. You are called to leadership because you, my friend, address an issue. You address a problem. Leaders are problem solvers. Leaders produce results. I did not say that leaders do all the work. I said leaders produce results. Leaders produce. But you know what leaders also produce? They produce other leaders. They produce other leaders, exactly. They produce other leaders. They produce equipped and capable people. They sow seeds into people's career growth and development. They challenge. So they produce environments that are conducive for teamwork and productivity, like you all have said throughout the chat today. Leaders produce. So our final thought today around expectations, and then I'm going to be quiet, is my man Confucius. The expectations of life depend upon diligence. The mechanic that would perfect his work must first sharpen his tools. I don't know about you, but we've picked up a few tools today. But I need you to now take it and run with it. I need you to take it and become sharper. You can't cut down a tree with a dull axe. All right, Bree, back to you. What questions do we have?
Thank you, Brian. Thank you. No questions, just a lot of comments of you stepping on people's toes. But they are not alone. So this was very inspiring, very good. Great meeting with valuable information are some of the responses coming along in the chat. At this moment, we don't have any questions. So I will wrap us up. Oh, this is very good information as a new supervisor. That was one of the comments that we received as well, Brian.
Awesome.
And even if you're not in a supervisor position, I think that a lot of these slides, especially on how to manage your expectations, will be good for managing yourself moving forward. So thank you for joining us today to this webinar. We will make the recording of this presentation available on our YouTube channel within 48 hours. If you want me to email this information to you directly, go ahead and drop your email addresses in the chat. Please take a moment to complete the survey that you see on the screen. You can use a QR code. You can use your camera to scan the QR code or type the bit.ly address that you see displayed below. But thank you again for joining us. Our next webinar will be on February the 22nd, and that will be led by Christina Martin, Help I Don't Like My Employees, and that will begin at 11 a.m. On behalf of the Leadership Institute, we appreciate your questions, your interest, and engagement throughout our time together. If you have any topic ideas or want additional information on how we can bring this topic to your organization, please email us at leadershipinstitute@columbusstate.edu. And with that, we hope you all enjoy what is left of your week. And I will be in touch with you all to send those resources. So thank you.
Bye, everybody. Go be great.